of our needs. The children's private apartments demand so much basic attention that I can't decide where to begin. That dark north playroom is a shocking scandal, but no more shocking than our hideous dining room, or our unventilated dormitories, or our tubless lavatories. If the institution is very saving, do you think it can ever afford to burn down this smelly old original building and put up instead some nice ventilated modern cottages? I cannot contemplate that wonderful institution at Hastings without being filled with envy. It would be some fun to run an asylum if you had a plant like that to work with. But anyway, when you get back to New York and are ready to consult the architect about remodeling, please apply to me for suggestions. Among other little details, I want 200 feet of sleeping porch running along the outside of our dormitories. You see, it's this way. Our physical examination reveals the fact that about half of our children are anemic. Anemic. Mercy, what a word. And a lot of them have tubercular ancestors, and more have alcoholic. Their first need is oxygen rather than education. And if the sickly ones need it, why shouldn't it be good for the well ones? I should like to have every child, winter and summer, sleeping in the open air, but I know that if I let fall such a bomb on the Board of Trustees, the whole body would explode. Speaking of trustees, I have met up with the Honourable Cyrus Wyckoff, and I really believe that I dislike him more than Dr. Robin McCrae, or the kindergarten teacher, or the cook. I seem to have a genius for discovering enemies. Mr. Wyckoff called on Wednesday last to look over the new superintendent. Having lowered himself into my most comfortable armchair, he proceeded to spend the day. He asked my father's business, and whether or not he was well-to-do. I told him that my father manufactured overalls, and that even in these hard times the demand for overalls was pretty steady. He seemed relieved. He approves of the utilitarian aspect of overalls. He had been afraid that I had come from the family of a minister or professor or writer. A lot of high thinking and no common sense. Cyrus believes in common sense. And what had been my training for this position? That, as you know, is a slightly embarrassing question. But I produced my college education and a few lectures at the School of Philanthropy, also a short residence in the college settlement. I didn't tell him that all I had done there was to paint the back hall and stairs. Then I submitted some social work among my father's employees, and a few friendly visits to the Home for Female Inebriates. To all of which he grunted. I added that I had lately made a study of the care of dependent children, and casually mentioned my 17 institutions. He grunted again, and said he didn't take much stock in this new-fangled scientific charity. At this point Jane entered with a box of roses from the florist's. That blessed Gordon Hallock sends me roses twice a week to brighten the rigours of institution life. Our trustee began an indignant investigation. He wished to know where I got these flowers, and was visibly relieved when he learned that I had not spent the institution's money for them. He next wished to know who Jane might be. I had foreseen that question and decided to brazen it out. "My maid," said I. "Your what?" he bellowed, quite red in the face. "My maid." "What is she doing here?" I amiably went into details. "She mends my clothes, blacks my boots, keeps my bureau drawers in order, washes my hair." I really thought the man would choke, so I charitably added that I paid her wages out of my own private income, and paid $5.50 a week to the institution for her board, and that, though she was big, she didn't eat much. He allowed that I might make use of one of the orphans for all legitimate service. I explained, still polite but growing bored, that Jane had been in my service for many years and was indispensable. He finally took himself off, after telling me that he, for one, had never found any fault with Mrs. Lippett. She was a common-sense Christian woman, without many fancy ideas, but with plenty of good solid work in her. He hoped that I would be wise enough to model my policy upon hers. And what, my dear Judy, do you think of that? The doctor dropped in a few minutes later, and I repeated the Honourable Cyrus's conversation in detail. For the first time in the history of our intercourse, the doctor and I agreed. Mrs. Lippett, indeed, he growled. The blethering old gomerel. May the Lord send him mere sense. When our doctor really becomes aroused, he drops into Scotch. My latest pet name for him, behind his back, is Sandy. Sadie Kate is sitting on the floor as I write, untangling sewing silks and winding them neatly for Jane, who is becoming quite attached to the little imp. "I am writing to your Aunt Judy," say I to Sadie Kate. "What message shall I send from you?" "I never heard of no Aunt Judy." "She is the aunt of every good little girl in this school." "Tell her to come and visit me and bring some candy," says Sadie Kate. I say so too. My love to the President, Sally. End of Part 3. Recorded by Gesine in October 2007.